Here's something that makes no sense. When a club buys a £100 million player, they don't have £100 million sitting in a bank account waiting to be spent. Most of the time, they don't have anything close to it. And yet the deal goes through, the player signs, the money moves. So where does it come from? The answer is stranger than you'd think. Football clubs buy players almost the same way you'd buy a house you can't afford, with borrowed money, tiny deposits, and a debt they'll spend years paying off. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a club pays a fee it doesn't have, why the selling club often doesn't get the money for years, and why some clubs quietly borrow from banks just to survive the wait. Let's break it down. In the last video, we saw how clubs account for transfer fees, spreading the cost across a contract so £1 billion barely shows up. But that was about how it looks on paper. This is different. This is about the actual cash, the real money that has to physically move from one club to another. And here's why it matters. Understanding this is the difference between panicking when your club spends £200 million and realising they might have only handed over £40 million this year. The headline number and the money that actually leaves the building are almost never the same thing. Once you see this, transfer deadline day never looks the same again. So let's start with the biggest myth in football. When you read player X signs for £80 million, you probably picture £80 million landing in the selling club's account. It almost never happens that way. Transfer fees are rarely paid in one lump sum. Instead, clubs agree to pay in instalments spread across several years. So an £80 million deal might actually be paid as, say, £20 million now and then £15 million a year for the next 4 years. The player joins immediately, but the money trickles out slowly, long after he's already playing. Think of it exactly like buying a car on finance. You drive it home today. You pay for it for years. The club gets the player today and pays for him over the length of his contract. Why do clubs do this? 2 reasons. First, cash flow. Even huge clubs don't keep hundreds of millions lying around because that money is busy doing other things. Wages, running the stadium, everyday costs. Second, and this connects to our last video, spreading the payments helps them stay inside the financial rules. Smaller yearly outgoings look healthier on the books. So the instalment isn't just convenient, it's a financial strategy. Now it gets cleverer, because that headline fee isn't even a fixed number. Most modern deals are split into 2 parts, a guaranteed fee and add-ons. The guaranteed fee is what the buying club definitely pays. Add-ons are extra payments that only happen if certain things come true. So a deal reported as £100 million might actually be £70 million guaranteed, plus £30 million in add-ons. And those add-ons are triggered by conditions, things like the player making a certain number of appearances, the team qualifying for the Champions League, or winning a trophy. If those things never happen, that money is never paid. This is genius for the buying club because it lets them manage risk. They're saying, we'll pay the full price only if this player actually delivers. And it helps the selling club too, because they get a share of the upside if the player turns out to be brilliant. So next time you see a massive transfer number, remember, a big chunk of it might be money that only gets paid in a future that may never arrive. The £100 million signing could really be a £70 million signing wearing a bigger price tag. But here's the part almost nobody talks about, and it's the most surprising. If the buying club pays slowly, in instalments, over years, then think about the selling club. They've lost their player today, but they won't see most of the money for years. And a lot of clubs, especially smaller ones, can't afford to wait that long. They need cash now to run the club. So what do? They go to a bank. The money a club is owed from a transfer has a name in football finance, a transfer receivable. It's basically an IOU from one club to another, and banks will lend against it. The selling club goes to a lender, says, another club owes me £60 million over the next 4 years. And the bank hands them a big chunk of that money up front in exchange for a fee. The bank then collects the instalments as they come in. This has become so common that many banks now have specialist football finance teams doing exactly this. So the money moving through a single transfer might pass through banks, loans, and years of scheduled payments, all invisible behind a simple headline number. And it means the buying clubs are, in effect, buying players with debt. Even the biggest clubs rarely pay cash. They use borrowing, future TV money, and staggered payments because the sums are simply too big to hand over all at once. So why does all of this matter? Because it completely changes how you should read the transfer market. When a club spends £300 million in a summer, the truth is, they probably didn't spend £300 million this year. They committed to paying it, slowly, some of it maybe never, funded partly by debt, spread across years of future income. It's a promise to pay, not a pile of cash. And this is exactly how a club can look like it's spending recklessly while staying just about afloat. And also how a club can suddenly collapse when those future payments come due and the money isn't there. Because a debt spread across years is still a debt, and it always, eventually, has to be paid. So there it is. Clubs don't pay transfer fees in cash. They pay in instalments, split into guaranteed money and add-ons that may never trigger, often funded by borrowing, while the selling club sometimes runs to a bank just to get paid early. The headline fee is almost a fiction. The real money is slower, smaller, and stranger than it looks. But this raises one final question. If clubs are buying players with borrowed money, they'll be paying off for years. What happens when it all goes wrong? What happens when the debts pile up and the money runs out? That's where football clubs actually collapse, and in the next video, we'll look at exactly how a club can spend its way into ruin. If you want football's money explained in plain English, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.